Autumn Lynn Casuto, also known as Ali, belongs to Alicante Speakers Club. Her profession has spanned her a range of technical and non-technical fields, and in each of them, there has been a need to communicate ideas precisely and clearly. I believe this is in every area of our lives, isn't it? Specifically, she has experience in the fields of engineering research, mortgage lendings, English teaching, and Toastmaster leadership. Actually, she's the current F3 area director and the author of the automated ballot collection spreadsheets, a marvelous tool, which is actually being used by many clubs already in this contest season. As she already mentioned, there will be a Q&A included in the given time frame, the last 10 minutes, so get ready for that. Write your question or just prepare them for the end. And now I leave the stage for Autumn, Ali, the ABCs of technical communication. A round of applause for our dear colleague, Autumn Lynn Casuto.
Thank you so much. And let me just say, I love these backgrounds that we have. I tend to use my hands a lot, so I'm going to turn it off for the workshop. But thank you so much, the team, for organizing these workshops, organizing so many opportunities for the listeners here and for the backgrounds, of course, to make it so festive and fun. Let's get right into it. The ABCs of technical communication. What I have found is that many of us Toastmasters are programmers, lawyers, engineers, or we have some kind of very specialized expertise knowledge. And for some of us, we come to Toastmasters to learn how to communicate in our professions more clearly. But what do we find? We start to give a long, elaborate Toastmaster speech about some law that was developed 100 years ago, or some engineering technique that is so interesting for us, but the audience just doesn't understand the technical communication that you're trying to communicate. The purpose of this workshop is to link some of those together. We learn so many good skills and techniques in Toastmasters, and sometimes it can feel like there's a gap between how to implement those in a Toastmaster session when we can't be our full professional self, and in a professional setting when we need these skills on a day-to-day basis. As Pablo mentioned, I have had the opportunity of spanning a few different industries. I started off in engineering research, and I was working on neuromechanics of the wrist. I changed, and instead of analyzing the wrist, was analyzing finances when I worked in a mortgage company, and I was reviewing credit, and then switching gears again to analyzing language. And currently I'm an English professor. So I've had the opportunity to see how we use communication, both technically and non-technically, in a variety of settings. So how can we do this? Well, the objective today is for you to walk away with some concrete techniques and tips for how you can implement the tools we learn in Toastmasters in your professional setting. And that's why I want to open this up for questions and answers at the end as well, because a lot of things are going to depend on the particular industry, but we can discuss it as a group. I can give my experience as well, and we'll figure out how we can best communicate these skills that we're learning in Toastmasters. The ABCs of technical communication. Obviously, the alphabet works A, B, C, D, E, F, G, but as any good building blocks, we're going to start at the base. We're going to start with C, understand B, and then work our way to the A. Now, imagine for a moment you are heading out the door to your car. You know, you're going to go grocery shopping or something. You start the engine, and it starts making an unsettling sound. Ring, clink, clink, clink. Ring, clink, clink, clink. Ooh. No idea what that means. I guess it's time to take it into the shop. There are 2 auto shops near where you live. You've seen one on the way because it always has the plaques of the awards it received from best service, best price for the value, and all the different types of automobiles it works on. There's another one that, I mean, doesn't look bad, but there's nothing that gives it that oomph, nothing that pulls you into it. So which auto shop do you go to? The one that looks like it's more credible. C, credibility. In Toastmasters, we always have someone introducing us. In a work setting, we may not always have someone introducing ourselves, but we introduce ourselves if nothing else. The C for credibility is all about creating that trust between you as the speaker and your listener. In work, it can be a formal presentation that you're giving to workmates, or it can be, it can even be like simple work meetings. If you're giving your opinion and your ideas for an upcoming project, this can be applied in many different settings. You want to build your credibility. And how do we do that? First of all, you need to understand where your strengths are. And this actually comes twofold. So if you are taking notes, take a minute to think, what are some of your strengths? What do you contribute when you are in a brainstorming session? With coworkers, with family members organizing an event, in all different types of settings. What do you contribute? Really think about your experiences, your strengths, and what you can give. By listing those out and listing as many as you can think, that in turn builds your confidence. And when you're confident in yourself, the listener will also respond and at least have that little more inkling to be confident and trust in what you have to say as well. So that's my first bit of advice. C, create your credibility. First, being objectively reasonable with yourself, what your strengths are, and letting yourself be comfortable admitting that confidence to your speaker. And when possible, actually say it explicitly, just like Pablo did and I did at the beginning of my speech. Say what your credentials are. That way, like those plaques on the auto shop, people can see and hear right from the beginning, this is why I should listen. And therefore kept their attention. Let's move on. B. So I understand we have an international audience here. So just by a show of hands, who knows the word jargon? Okay, good. A majority? Nice. Who knows the word homonym? A few? Okay. So this is good for me to know as well, because these are technical terms. I'm talking about how to communicate technical things more simply, no? Jargon refers to specialized words, especially for a topic. So when you're on the computer using the internet, you might see words such as bandwidth, firewall, cookies. These are all related to the topic of the internet. If you're watching a baking show, you might hear words such as zest, emulsion, cookies. Again, specialized words for a topic. These can sometimes be complicated, like we probably have an idea that low bandwidth means we're not going to have a good connection, but we might not know fully what that entails. Some of us may or may not know emulsion, and maybe it's more, you can kind of guess the meaning when you're actually seeing a baking show in person. The point is that, complicated or not, they're used for a particular topic. So someone in one industry is going to have a different set of jargon than someone in a different industry. Then there's that word cookies, the one that showed up on both lists. That's a homonym, a word that has the same spelling, same pronunciation, but a different meaning depending on context. Now, cookies is a trivial example, and I recognize that, because if someone says, hey, do you want cookies? You're gonna see, are they on the computer or are they in the kitchen? And you know immediately what's happening. But I find that even within an industry, if you have one department talking to another, so for example, like a sales team talking to a development team, or front end talking to back end, they might have the exact same word that has basically the same meaning, but they use it in a slightly different manner. So if you're not careful, even when you're talking normally and you think your listener understands what you're saying, all of these words that you're using can end up sounding like blah, blah, blah. And it might have even happened right here with us. Like if I asked, has anyone heard of jar blah or hama blah blah? And that's what we want to try to avoid. So the first step is to just be aware that these blah blah moments exist. How do we find them? And how do we clarify? Finding them, I will admit, takes some time and practice. What I notice is that you receive an email and the person isn't really responding to your request like you wanted. Maybe they're talking about something else, or they're kind of getting at the solution, but they're not getting to the point like you want. Well, maybe they don't understand what you're asking, or maybe there's a word that's confusing, that jar blah blah or hama blah blah blah. So you can try to look for those, and with time, change the wording, ask questions, really investigate. The underlying principle is to think, what is my listener, or in the case of an email, what is my reader actually receiving? I might say one thing, but what are they receiving? How would they interpret this in their position? So once we find that we want to clarify something, we understand that there is misunderstanding or confusion going on, what can we do? Like I said, ask questions, change the wording, say the same thing in a new way, elaborate with details and examples. Just like the examples of cookie can quickly and visually give an example of what I'm talking about without having to explain the definition of it. So we have C for credibility, B for blah, blah, blah. Let's move on to that A. Does anybody have a piece of paper handy? Just a loose sheet of paper. It doesn't have to be perfect. Mine has something cut out of it. Okay, we have a few. I see Noberto. I think Pablo is grabbing one. Sarah, perfect. So Noberto, Pablo, and Sarah, follow this first set of instructions, and then I'll have everyone else follow the next set of instructions, okay? So Norberto, Pablo, and Sarah, what I want you to do is fold the paper vertically in quarters, never folding the paper over itself.
How's that again? Folding the paper?
Fold the paper vertically in quarters, never folding the paper over itself. And show me what you got. It's okay. Okay, nice. Pablo? If you hold it like right in front of you, usually it won't mess up with the background. Noberto? All right, we have some good examples here. Okay, but they are, yes, they are very close to what I was saying. Now everyone else, so Pablo, Noberto, y Sarah, no, but everyone else who has their piece of paper, follow these set of instructions. Fold the paper long ways to make the letter M. So fold the paper long ways. I'll even give you one more. Fold the paper long ways like an accordion to make the letter M. I see Diego working on it. Maybe Sheila. As soon as you have it, go ahead and hold it up and let's see what we got. Go ahead, what was that? Nice. Yes. Can I see, I'm sorry, arrows covering your name. Is it Vanessa? See, Vanessa. Can you hold it up one more time? Okay, nice. That's how mine is, the letter M. Long ways and the letter M, which is the same as saying vertically in quarters, 1, 2, 3, 4, but the letter M is just a lot easier to understand than vertically in quarters, at least from my perspective. So what does this show us? By saying the letter M, by trying to simplify my instructions, what I'm actually doing is giving you an analogy. Analogies are so key to understanding. And this is for novices and experts alike. It doesn't matter if you've been in a field 1 month, 1 year, or 10 years. Being able to hear and explain with analogies can be so key to communicating clearly, or at least understanding new concepts especially. I like to think of it almost like if you have these islands. You have these islands where you vaguely understand a concept, but maybe you can't like ship out on sea. You can't quite explain it to someone else, but you more or less understand it. Those analogies are like the bridges that connect the islands together and connect it to the larger city of comprehension. So, how can we be more creative to create some of these analogies? I also have a few tips for that. Because yes, creating analogies, having creativity is a skill just like any other. Just like we may or may not go to the gym sometimes to work our muscles, we do recognize that after working it for a while, they get stronger. Just like creativity. If we work on creativity, that muscle will get stronger and it'll be more natural and easier to create analogies in the future. My first tip for building your creativity so that you can think up more analogies is to simply find 2 unrelated topics. Let's say the desert and a household kitchen chair. Okay, whatever 2 unrelated topics, and try to find similarities and differences between them. What this is doing is that it's forcing you to make connections to things that otherwise don't have them. And I'm not referring to just 1 or 2, like, okay, well, they're obviously different because of this, and they're similar because you can sit on a chair in the desert. Really try to dig deep. Think up at least 10 similarities and at least 10 differences for 2 unrelated topics. And if you do that on a regular basis, maybe once a week, once a month, once a day, depending on how much you really want to be working on that creativity muscle and strengthening your power, you can do it as often as you like. But by using this exercise, it forces you to make those connections. It forces you to possibly come up with analogies right there on the spot. And if not, you're at least setting your brain up so that it can connect these different islands more synchronously, more easily. That is the first tip. The second tip is to try to simplify a technically heavy work concept as if you're going to explain it to a 5-year-old. Now, I don't say that to make something juvenile or silly. I say it as a way to simplify the concept to its most important pieces, or the pieces that everyone can relate to. Another tip that I often hear is writing often, just by sheer writing often. That helps you organize thoughts. I have to admit, I think this is a great tip, but it's not something that I do. So I recommend it more as a side note or anecdote than from personal experience. And I admit that. But I think what writing is really getting at is being able to organize your thoughts and create content. And I have good news for all of you. Thank you. I have good news for all of you. What do we do in Toastmasters? We create speeches. We are creating content all the time. So by sticking with Toastmasters, you are also working that creativity muscle, and hopefully you can think a little more formally on how to apply analogies, how to avoid those blah blah moments, and how to build your credibility. I have one thing to end on here, and then we'll move to the Q&A session. I want to remind you all that you can get credit for pathways by giving speeches at work, by giving work presentations. You need two things. You need prior approval from the Vice President of Education, and then you need a Toastmaster there to evaluate you, or not evaluate you in the session, but after the work meeting, for example, they can talk to you and give you their evaluation. And so that is a perfect opportunity and a perfect way to apply Toastmasters in a work setting with all of the technically heavy topic and still get a great evaluation from it. If you don't have any workmates that go to Toastmasters, new member opportunity. I am going to share in the chat a quick PDF that I created, just summing up what we discussed here today. And with that, I want to thank you all for the time here, and I will open it up to questions and answers related to any type of work communication or technical communication that you have found. Thank you so much. I see Pablo had written in the chat that what your audience's thought process is linked with what Darren was saying. I was thinking the same thing during him, like, it connects to what I was going to say as well.
Those two islands.
Mm-hmm. Fernando, do you have something to say?
Just I used to have a problem in my work because we think we are using technical vocabulary, but sometimes it's not that we don't understand this, it's rather that we misunderstand without realizing. For instance, I'm database administrator. What is a database? And in the people in the branch, also in the same enterprise, depending on you are working, they understand something quite different. And sometimes, as database administrator, I have it clear, but also other database administrators in other enterprises, depending on which technologies they are working with, they understand something different. Also, your boss or the people in the front-end developers, they understand something different. And we have only one single word for many different concepts. And even though it's very difficult to unify a lexicon, how to say, a corporate lexicon, to unify the meanings, also because many people just it's very difficult to break the inners of the customs. They want to keep on working the old way all the time. How could we manage to overcome all these kind of difficulties? Because sometimes you have to write even an email for people that for a single word will understand each of them different things.
Mm-hmm. And obviously for database or for any particular word, your case might be a little bit different than mine. But from my experience, I had this case happen all the time, because when I was working for the mortgage company, I would say, I need to verify their money. I need to verify their bank statements. And so what I would often get is I would get basically like a computer screenshot of, okay, this is how much I have in my bank account. And it's like, no, I need like, I need to have your name. I need to have the account number. I need to have the ongoing balance. I need all the transactions for the month. And so what I ended up having was just like on the side of my computer, I had the list of, when I say bank statement, I can copy and paste a bank statement and then in parentheses with ... And so it made an email or a communication longer, but it was also much clearer. And so I would get the document back correctly in a much faster way. So one way, if you find that you're having a communication gap between different departments like that, is having kind of in mind, or even on like a side copy and paste document, a quick explanation of what you're trying to say. And that's, at least from my personal experience, what I have found to be the most effective and quickest solution.
Thank you.
Yes, Robert adds, know your audience. Know your audience is so key.
Thank you. Thank you, Lynn. I have a question for negotiation communication. If the other person didn't show a credibility in his or her communication, how we can to go on with this communication skill negotiation?
Are you asking if someone, like if someone's going to talk but you don't know what their credentials are?
Yes, exactly. If they didn't have a correct items, or it's exaggerate.
Okay. You can definitely ask them, because along with the idea of knowing your audience, if you know where they're coming from, maybe you'll understand why they're exaggerating. Other than that, if you're not sure if they have credentials or not, you can basically evaluate based on what you know and what they're saying, and if that is compatible or not. And if it's not, maybe clarifying that as well, like, okay, in what scenario? You know, because a lot of times when we talk, it's not one answer that covers every situation. It's, you know, answer blue covers the blue stripe, answer red covers the red stripe. And then if they say, oh, red is the answer for everything, clarify, red is the answer for everything within the red stripe. So you might be able to clarify that as well. I mean, if you're talking to someone and you feel like they just don't have the credentials, that might also be the case from time to time. And when you're presenting yourself, I definitely don't want you to be confident in nothing. I don't want you to be like a cardboard cutout where you talk the talk, but you can't walk the walk. So that's why I recommend, at least for our own personal selves, be realistic, be objective. What are your personal strengths? That way you know what you can communicate and where your limitations are. I hope that helps.
Okay, thank you. Basically, I go directly to my alternative, and I say, okay, and so on. I winded up the communication. Thank you.
I'm glad I could help. My email is included on that PDF that I shared. So if we aren't getting to your question, feel free to send me an email afterwards and I'll follow up with you as well. I think we probably have time for one more question.
I just have a quick comment. Thank you very much, Atom. And last week I did a presentation for project managers about communication. And I used this book, which was a formal training a few years ago. And just for coincidence, there is a chapter at the beginning about common vocabulary. Just to tell us about the importance of having a form, that part that you said, be aware of the analogies and what you're saying. So that is very important, really.
I agree. It is so key. And often, I mean, there can be whole arguments just because people have misunderstood a word.
Yes.
Like, honestly, I see that. So I agree. That's so important. Thank you, everyone, for joining the workshop. It looks like we are going to be moving back into the main room to close. So again, feel free to email me if you have any feedback, follow-up questions, anything else to add. I would love to hear from you.
Thank you very much.